Welcome, and I am Mary Youngren. I'm the owner of Advent Talent Group, and we are so happy to host this excellent insider view and tips on how to present yourself in the job market. And we are, yes, recording this event, so we will be able to share with those of you who are attending live and those who could not attend, who have registered, and we'll be sharing last week's session as well as this session. And we're just delighted to have you guys with us. Advent Talent Group is a local and woman-owned, I'm the owner, staffing recruiting company. And we have celebrated 20 years. So we're almost at 22 years in business. And we do three lanes of recruiting. We recruit in the human resources space, office and accounting space, and the marketing creative space. So those are our focus areas. And we do contract staffing as well as direct and permanent placement. And a very important value for us, we have a little superhero team here. A very important value for us, though, is to make a difference. And this community involvement is so important to us. And this kind of service that we want to provide to the community is something that we want to be a resource for all of you who are job seekers, as well as for our clients. And we find what we do to be different, and our little tagline is that we're changing the way people feel about staffing. And we are just delighted to have an amazing team with us today. And our wonderful moderator is Erica Edwards. So she is an HR professional and a networking extraordinaire. And I'm sure many of you are here because of Erica's great reputation. And this evolved from her passion about educating others. She, when she was younger, she dreamed of being a teacher, but now she teaches through managing a team and working with candidates and hiring managers to find the right people. She's in the recruiting and talent acquisition space. And as this senior recruiting and talent acquisition manager for Caribou, Erica values the ability to develop a reliable, strong, and diverse workforce. She takes time to coach and provide feedback on the selection of the right candidate. And she believes DEI is a must in corporations, but employers, it's time to invest heavily now in inclusion. That's her message. And it's important to ensure that everyone who's willing, has the opportunity, should feel comfortable with this evolving and increasingly more diverse workforce. And we are just absolutely honored to have Erica with us. I do have to say, before I turn it over to you, Erica, that we are sad to not be able to have Ed Huerta Margota with us today. He has some health concerns and is having to deal with that. And we wish him the best. We're thinking about you, Ed, and you're in our thoughts and prayers. So we're sorry that you could not join us, but we're just delighted to have Candy Anderson with us, who was able to stand in. So without further message from me, Erica, take it away. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Mary. I just love when you do the introductions. All right. Well, welcome everyone to the second session in our Lunch and Learn series for job seekers. In this session, we're going to focus on interview and offer stages of the hiring process. So a couple of quick things to note. You will find the chat icon at the bottom. Also, you will see the closed caption. So if you, from an inclusion standpoint, I always use closed captions. So just note the button is right below. And then the Q&A icon is at the bottom as well of the window. So because we're asking that you use the Q&A function during our session today. So if you can, just try to use your questions for the Q&A. Now, let's take a minute right now as we're all getting settled in the chat. Please add your first name, where you're joining us from, and what's the weather like where you are. Because we here in Minnesota is having some extraordinary weather. So curious to see if you guys are having the same. All right, let's see who we have. Oh, I want to say hello to a few people. Well, thank you. Gina, thank you. Daryl. Hi, Amy. Wonderful, wonderful. All right, so the last 15 minutes of our session, we will leave open for you for the Q&A. So without further ado, let me introduce our panelists. All right, and first we have Jay. Jay, please welcome. And Jay, if you don't mind introducing yourself, tell us a little bit about your purpose and what all that you do.
Thank you, Erica. Nice to meet the rest of you folks on this call as well. So officially, my recruiter title is for the Minnesota Department of Revenue. We are a state agency, and what the Revenue Department does is we tend to think of ourselves as we're funding the future for all of Minnesotans, as we like to say. We manage taxes both for people, property, and businesses. And these taxes go on to fund state programs such as healthcare, transportation, public safety, early childhood, education, and K through 12, and also higher ed, colleges and universities as well. We like to believe at Revenue, we're dedicated to inclusive workspaces. We celebrate diversity of employees that come in. We often like to, hire from communities which reflect the work that we go out and do as well. And we do celebrate culture of inclusion where we're at. And the number one thing that I like about Revenue is our work-life balance, as we have gravitated toward mostly a hybrid work capacity at Revenue. So that means many of us get the option of working from home or going into the office, which is great too, because our offices have actually been updated as well. And a little bit more about my past. I have recruited in different industries as well, including corporate roles and also nonprofit areas. But at Revenue, we're solely focused on mostly collections, auditors, people who might enjoy working with numbers, etc. So thank you, Erica.
Thank you so much, Jay. We're so excited to have you be part of our session today. I definitely know being part of the state government, it's probably just super exciting adventure for you. And I'm very excited to have known you for a while. Right, the next person that we will now welcome Cameron. Cameron, I'm gonna do a little introduction. I'm gonna switch it up a little bit. So Cameron, you are a dynamic and accomplished HR professional with a proven track record of driving organizational growth and champion diversity initiatives. So currently you are serving in the HR space as an HRBP at the Greater Twin Cities United Way. Cameron spearheaded significant business and staff growth, demonstrating expertise in full cycle recruiting and diversity. Cameron, would you like to add anything else on there?
Thank you, Erica. Not too much else to add. I'm excited to be here. Excited to lend a little bit of what I've learned myself in my career so far, working with talent across the Twin Cities. And just to add, in case there's anybody with info on this call, I'm also an actor and performer. So I came from an acting background. I still do some acting and stuff throughout the Twin Cities, but have spent the last 8 years working in the nonprofit sector.
Wow. Well, that is a little bit more to know about you because I didn't know that, Cameron. So learn something new every day. This is why I love doing these type of platforms. All right. Well, welcome, Cameron. And thank you so much once again. All right, next we have Candy. Candy Anderson is a Senior Talent Acquisition Manager at Wings Financial Credit Union. With a career that began in marketing, supporting at a staffing agency, Candy's passion for connecting individuals with their ideal career path led to her transitioning into recruiting. Candy currently leads the talent acquisition team and function for the Wings Credit Union, providing leadership and mentoring to the talent acquisition team and hiring managers. Kenny, as a trusted partner on the recruiting strategies, processes, branding, metrics, and candidate experience. Candy, would you like to add anything else?
A lot of it, so thank you. I'm really excited to be here today. Unlike Cameron, I'm not an actor, so being in front of the camera is not my favorite thing. But no, no, I'm really excited to be here and just share kind of some interview tips and tricks with the community. And when I started out my career in recruiting, I really focused on the entry level candidates. I did a lot of prepping and helping them prepare for interviews. So I'm excited to come back and be able to do that now with other folks. So thank you.
You're welcome. Welcome again, Candy. We're so thankful that you were able to step in. Well, please join me in welcoming our panelists. Let's go ahead and get started. Let's just dive right into those questions. And so for the first topic, we're going to talk a little bit about preparing for that interview. And so Candy, I'm going to call you right back up to the stage again. Candy, as a senior talent acquisition leader, what research and preparation steps do you recommend for job seekers, before that interview? And what role does staying informed about the company challenges and opportunities, like how can that play into this preparation?
Yeah, good question. Definitely, I would say, do your research before, interviewing with an organization. I've had, many times where I've gone to interview candidates and ask them what they know about us, and they don't know anything, or they'll ask me to remind them again what the job is that they're interviewing for. So I'd say definitely, do your research, find out more about that organization. Employers are like candidates where we want to know if somebody's excited about us and have done their research before they come in. And I think, going out, looking at the candidate's website, finding out information there, doing a Google search, see what news might be about, if there's anything new about that organization in the news that you want to know. Do your research on Glassdoor, look up the organization, see what pain points might be there, what good and bad things are said about that company, just so you have a better idea of what you're getting into as well. It's not just about a good fit for their employer. You want to make sure it's a good fit for you as well. And if you do see anything that looks like maybe it doesn't align with what you're looking for, or maybe there's opportunities, ask about that in an interview. It's okay to ask those types of questions, and just to find out more about where you might fit in your role with that company.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Candy. What I usually tell people, just as much as we're interviewing you, you need to interview the company as well. So great tips to take away. All right. Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt, but I was going to say, you're looking for the right fit on both sides and what's going to matter in it. That's so important on both ends to feel that. So, definitely they want to know that you're excited about them going into.
Yeah, so true. All right. Well, Cameron, drawing from your experience as a TA leader, talent acquisition leader, what methods can candidates employ to assess their alignment, with the culture, the values of the organization throughout their entire interview process? How can they be authentically and then showcase that this is really like a win-win and an alignment for everyone?
Yeah, great question, Erica. So, I think it's important to remember as a job seeker that not only is the organization getting information from you, but you're also getting information from the organization. So as you're sitting across that table, talking to that hiring manager, or on Zoom, talking to a panel of people at the company waiting to hire you, give yourself an opportunity to read their energy, their passion, their understanding. Ask questions at the end about people's experience working at the company to help gauge for yourself if their experiences and their celebrations are in line with what you're looking for. Many corporations or companies have a website where they list their values of how they do their work, or their mission, what they're trying to accomplish. And so do your research ahead of time, of course, like I think we would all encourage, but as you are being assessed in the interview process, don't forget yourself to assess the company in that soft time as well. So if you're noticing that your interviewer is not paying a great amount of attention to you, or they seem to have a negative attitude, maybe that's not the company you want to join. But on the opposite end of things, if you're experiencing a very welcoming and inclusive environment, if the values that you've read about seem to be showing up in the way that you're being interviewed and the way that you're having these conversations, then that is always encouraging. So I would just do your research ahead of time, evaluate during the interview process, and then also don't be afraid to ask questions. Even after you've completed your interview, many times an HR professional or a hiring manager will offer a way to get a hold of them with additional questions, either through phone or email. So if you're sitting there and you're seriously considering a position and you're thinking about what kind of environment you might be stepping into, don't just wonder, ask. Many times they'll be willing to tell you some of that information that you're curious about, or connect you with somebody in the company who can answer some of those questions.
So true. And we love when you actually, when we say, hey, do you have any questions? We want you to ask us questions. So please come prepared. And we're going to talk a little bit more about some of those questions that you can prepare for. All right. Thank you so much, Cameron. Jay, as an experienced recruiting leader like yourself, with expertise across several industries, let's talk a little bit about some tips or advice that you would help us here to prepare for this interview.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Erica, and thank you for Cameron and Candy as well for their insight. So I think the number one thing that I've worked with some candidates on is LinkedIn is a valuable resources that we use as recruiters, and it can be a valuable resource for candidates as well. And if you don't have a LinkedIn account, go ahead and create one right now, build that network. And, typically when I'm doing my own job search, I'm going to see who I'm connected to on LinkedIn, especially to the organization. And as I often tell folks in the Twin Cities area here, we tend to think of Minneapolis and St. Paul as a large metro area, but it is actually, to me, a pretty small community. After a while, everyone gets to know each other here. So, research that job and go on LinkedIn, see if you have any connections related to that organization or the hiring manager, right? And, reach out to that connection that you have, see if they can offer any insights to the organization or the role a little bit more before you go into the interview. And as you're doing that research, look at, have there been any restructures in that organization? Is this a new team that you're going to be working on? And Erica, you talked a little bit about it before the start of our event here, but hey, does the organization have a DEI statement, right? So, be prepared for some of those questions that might come up around equity and inclusion. And during my time in nonprofit organizations, I found that oftentimes hiring managers might be looking for a values fit versus more of a technical skill set for some of those roles. So this might be a little bit more specific to the nonprofit industry, but hey, this can also be used towards other roles, especially in the corporate sector as well. If you're looking to join a larger team, making sure that your values aligns with the values of that organization. And then also, as you're researching the specific job that you're hiring for, you can run something simple as a Google search. How do you make yourself stand out competitively from other candidates who are strong? They might have the same set of skills, knowledge, and qualifications as you do. Maybe there's some, volunteer work you did in the past, some pro bono work that you did that maybe doesn't actually count as paid work, but it shows the strengths that you've accomplished doing some of those roles as well. And then, for example, at Revenue here, we actually send out interview questions in advance to our applicants. But I know not all organizations will do that as well. And I did see some notes up here. Hey, sites like Indeed or Glassdoor, they do let users post, interviews and experiences. So that's a good place to look to see a little bit about how that interview process looks like. And before the interview, just thinking about, logistical things like, post-COVID, a lot of us have been gearing towards more of a virtual interview process.
Right.
So that means, hey, 10 minutes before you're going to log in, make sure you're in a quiet spot, your car doesn't count. Make sure it's in a spot that there's not a lot of people in. Test your mic, test your video, just make sure that you don't have any interruptions during this piece. And of course, if it's in person still, some of our old traditional advice still goes a long way. Show up early, be cordial to everyone you meet along the way. And then anything that you can prep for after the interview as well is also helpful. So if there are any thank you inquiries you want to prepare in advance, whether it's an email, LinkedIn message, or a thank you
Mhm.
card in the mail, you can get all those sorted out of the way before your interview actually starts.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. We still love those traditional ways of a good note card. And I'm looking behind me because I actually have a candidate that left, actually dropped one in the mail, and I've kept it to this day. So it's just inspiring just to see the thank yous that come in. So that goes a long way, the traditional ways as well of writing. All right. So now let's talk a little bit about these successful interviews. We've talked about the networking piece of staying connected on LinkedIn. And Jay, you talked a little bit about how you will do your research on the company. Some other great ways would be connecting on LinkedIn, reaching out to people that work at those organizations. So Cameron, how can candidates demonstrate adaptability and problem-solving skills during this interview, especially when they're faced with scenario-based questions? So we love those. And what are some creative ways that they can express their unique strengths now that they've done their research, they've reached out to networking with other people? What's
Mhm.
next for them in this situation?
Yeah, this is a great question. And I think something that once you're practiced at this, will help help you see more success in the process. So something that's I'm kind of piggybacking off of Jay's comments around sending questions ahead of time. It's a great tool to use. We use it for some of our positions at Greater Twin Cities United Way and leadership. Um, and yet, many organizations don't. And I would say I learned a great acute tip a couple of years ago about how to surmise potential questions from reviewing that job description. So as you're looking at there was duties or responsibilities of a job, or the qualifications or the competencies or skills that they're looking for yourself, as a way to prepare ahead of time, figure out how those could translate into questions. For example, if somebody is on a job ad describing that they need somebody with relationship building skills. Well, then likely a question you're going to get during the interview process, whether it's the phone interview, first interview, next interview, is going to be around your relationship skills. So you don't have to phrase it perfectly, but you could imagine that they'll ask you something along the lines of, can you tell us about a time in your work where you've built a successful relationship that got you closer to your goals, is an example. That way, you can take your best guess at some of the questions that may be asked during the process and employ a prepared answer and use what many of us know as the STAR method. So I think this is a way to get to the heart of your best responses, especially in terms of scenario-based questions, which is what the STAR method is intended to address. So for those of you who don't know, the STAR method is a method to answer scenario-based or experience-based interview questions where you basically set the situation, that's the S. You say the task at hand, that's your T, what you were responsible for otherwise. The A is the action that you took to address the task within the situation. And then R at the end, STAR, STAR method. The R is results. So, what was the result of you taking this action on the task that you were given within the situation? That way you cover all of your bases within your response around scenario-based questions. Now, showing adaptability and problem-solving skills could mean um, answering, tagging onto your answer other ways that you may have addressed the problem or solved the problem, even moving past what you've already done. So, the STAR method is intended to give a real example of something that you have accomplished. But maybe that was 2 years ago and you've learned more since then. And you can say, now, if I was given the same task, I might do this or this or this instead. Or if the culture is different, I would do this. And that way you're able to, in real time, especially with scenario-based questions, represent how you can show up as adaptable or have problem-solving abilities by kind of giving a sneak peek at your toolkit, right?
Mhm.
I know how to solve a problem not only with this method, but if there are different circumstances at play here, I can also solve this problem this way, or this way, or this way. But I'll dive deep into one.
Really good. So great. Cameron, I love how you talked a little bit about looking at the job description and changing up some of the things to tell me, tell me about a time or, describe.
Mhm.
So those are some really great tips to take with you and add to your toolkit. In the first session, I talked a little bit about a cookbook. It's like adding to the recipes. And so in this one, it's now, adding these to your toolbox or your toolkit. So now, Candy, what are some pitfalls that you have seen from candidates that they should avoid when responding to some of the challenging or unexpected questions during the interviews? How can they effectively address those weaknesses without really just going too far over in the interview?
Good question, and I would say, I think first off, be honest. If they're asking a question and maybe it's about something you haven't done yet in your career, it's okay to say, I haven't, either ask them to repeat the question if you're not sure exactly what they're saying, to kind of buy yourself more time to think about it. But then it's okay to say, I haven't done that yet, but here's what I have done. And be able to give maybe a different example of maybe it's not the exact question they're asking you, but you can take some previous experience that you've had that could be relatable to that and go through the same, types of the situation, task, action, result, type of answers to give, an answer that's going to be relative to what they're looking for. But I'd absolutely say, be honest. It's okay to say that you haven't done, that exact type of thing that they're asking. But how can you find something else in your background that's related to that? And to kind of piggyback on what Cameron said, even if the result maybe wasn't exactly what you would have wanted, a customer service situation, for example, you're giving an example, and maybe the outcome wasn't exactly the best scenario, the customer still left upset, or whatever it might be. You can also use that example to be able to explain, what you would do differently now, or what you learned from that experience. And maybe I didn't handle that right at that time, but here's what I know now. So being able to
Right.
talk about it, and it's okay. We've all done things that maybe didn't have the outcome we wanted, right? But it's okay. What did you learn, and reflect on that. And then I would also say, don't go negative. Even if, maybe you had a coworker or a boss or someone that wasn't overly helpful in your career, you don't want to talk about that in your interviews. That's one of the things I talk about. Don't go negative. Try to find the positive in any of the situations while you're interviewing. And, with the situation task, results, action results, questions, another thing I would suggest is, focusing on you and what your part of that, question was. A lot of times we'll see people talk about, we did this, my team did this, if maybe they're not able to quite answer the question. But you need to kind of take it into what you did specifically versus what the team did, because that's one that we see a lot too. If people aren't sure how to answer, they'll talk about the team, but not so much their work.
Yep.
So you want to focus on that as well.
Absolutely. I think it's really just finding that balance, right? Not just saying I did this. It's really, we and finding a nice, healthy balance of talking about, what you did personally, also what you did as a team collaboration. So I know we tend to, listen for a little bit of everything and not just so focused on, one result. So thank you so much for adding that. That is just absolutely fabulous. Jay, why is it so important, for candidates to ask questions when given that opportunity? So I, talked a little bit about that in the beginning, how we're just ready and for you to ask us some questions. So could you suggest a few effective ones that the group can be insightful? A couple questions that I want them to walk away with. What would you say?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Erica. And just it's going to go back to interview prep again. Questions. I would say think of these questions before you go to your interview as well. And as they're answered, you can cross them off and then save some of the more important questions as they come up. We do want to be succinct with the questions in terms of making sure they're clear. And it's also good to ask questions because it gets good insight to the interview panel to make sure that the candidate is engaged throughout the process too, right? So,
Mhm.
some example questions I would say might be good ones, and I can go through an entire list here, but I'll just list a few off the top of my head here. So, think about questions you might want to ask for resources for the role. If you're being hired for a role, you want to make sure the resources there so you can be successful in that role. So you can ask something along the lines of, hey, is this role supported by leaders in the organization? What types of resources are available to me as I come into this role? And that can give you a good understanding of if you will be successful in that role. I would say standard questions. Hey, what's the hiring timeline? Typically, recruiters will give you a timeline of next steps and what happens next. And I also like to ask managers if they are part of the interview team, what their supervision style is. As we all know, across work environments, everyone has their different work styles that they come in, and being able to work along with the same teams, is that going to make you more successful or less successful in your role as well? And typically, I would say it's good to ask about the retention rate of the role depending on the position. I do know some roles have higher turnovers than others, but if you ask about the retention rate, how long has that manager been in that role? How long has this team been in place? That might give you a good sense of for example, if a manager has been there for 4 or 5 years and their team has been there for 2 or 3 years, that means it's a good working environment, generally speaking, versus they're always hiring a new person every few months, every 2 years or so. That kind of gives you a good sense if it's not the right environment for you to be in.
Mhm.
And maybe ask, hey, how does the next 60, 90 days look like in this role? What makes a successful candidate in this role coming in? And this is a new question I would consider is important to ask these days as well. Is this a remote or hybrid role, right?
Yes.
Am I required to come in a certain number of days a week? Am I required to work from home these days? And I think it's important to get that transparency out of the way right away, just so there's no misunderstanding between the
So true.
candidates and the organization, what that expectation is. And I know it's different for every organization out there.
So
Ask about what their onboarding practices is like. Is there going to be any training involved in this role, especially if you're coming into a new role that you might not have as much familiarity with as well? You can also ask about any past collaborations between different departments. That'll give you a good sense of if you're going to be working more solo on your team, or if there's going to be more interactions among other team members. Hey, is this division siloed off and doing their own stuff, and am I going to be siloed off and doing my own stuff as well?
Mhm.
Are there
So
opportunities for professional growth, learning opportunities, room for growing, etc.? So those would be some of the core areas I would ask. And there's a ton of questions out there to ask. So, but I
Yeah.
think that's a good starting point.
Absolutely. I am sure that the chat will be, I'm really hoping that people will be putting things in the chat around some of the questions that they have been asked and it was like, or you were kind of stuck on. So we would love to hear about that too. So if you have some questions that you will want to know how to answer, this will be a great time to hold those questions and also put it in the Q&A as well. Well, good. Oh, thank you so much. I really, something really stuck out to me, Jay, when you said about hybrid remote and axing. So one of the things that stuck out was the required, right? So why, I would say Cameron, because you work in this nonprofit as well, why would you use required versus it, is it okay? Like how often? Well, what's required? What really sticks out for you on that one?
I think different environments have different cultures. And so it could be that you're working somewhere that has hotel desking, where somebody uses the same desk that you use Monday, Wednesday on Tuesday, Thursday, and the whole company works remote Fridays or things like that. And so there could be days where a company might not encourage you to come into work because there's no dedicated workspace for you. That's probably more likely like a startup environment or like a very small company. Um, but it's possible. I would say on the employer side of things, we should probably try to make it as clear as possible. I'm somebody who posts, I do full cycle. So I develop the descriptions, I post the job ads, I do all the notifications, I do it all for all of our jobs. And so I try to make it clear in our job postings, or at least in the first phone interview, what that looks like. So that by the time you get to more meaningful interviews, you don't have to ask some of those questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love that. And I love that you added all of those tips because it brings more clarity rather than getting in that position and you're like, well, I didn't realize I was going to have to come in 5 days a week. I thought it was just 2. So Cameron, now that we've kind of, prepared, done this interview, it seems like everything was successful. After the interview, what is the, recommended timeline? We all want to know, like, how long should it take for, you to follow up with the candidate and the candidate to follow up? Like, what should be included in this message?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say it really depends on the interview stage that you're at. I would say if you've just applied, that you probably want to give it a good week before you reach out to anybody at the company inquiring on the status of your application. Now, this is just a general guideline because all companies are different. But I would say a week is probably a good bet to just see if anybody has viewed it, if you can restate your interest in the role and in the work of the company. After you've had some interviews, or maybe you've had a phone interview, I would say you could probably message between 3 days and a week to the recruiter that you're working with to get updates along the way. So many times, if a recruiter is using best practices, they'll kind of give you an idea of what that looks like Jay had mentioned, in terms of the overall recruitment timeline. So let's say me as the recruiter, I've said to you, okay, thank you so much for the phone interview today. We'll be getting back to you by the end of next week if we've decided to move forward or with any decision that we've made. I would say let their promise happen before you reach out. So if it has not yet reached the end of next week, just wait. You'll probably hear back either way. If it has reached the end of next week and you haven't heard anything, go ahead and send a message. There could be mitigating circumstances, like the hiring manager got sick or different things come up. We're humans too. And so reaching out in accordance with maybe the timeline they've laid out. In terms of ultimately getting the job offer or not, I think if you know for sure that you've reached the final stages of an interview, I would say, again, between like 3 days and a week after, if you don't hear anything, reach out, get an idea of where they're at with their decision timeline. As is the case with many jobs everywhere, we hope to, as recruiters, have multiple great options at the end of a recruitment cycle. And so it's possible that although you might not be the first choice, that you are still chosen for the role because of things that happen in between negotiations between the first person that they decided to offer. And you might not ever know that, but it just means that there's a little bit of variability between the time when you last interview and the time when you hear back from the company about whether or not you've obtained the position or they're going to offer you the position or not. I would say most good companies these days, caveat most, are good about following up with everybody that has been through the interview process in a timely manner to notify you if you are moving forward or not. So my practice is typically within like 48 hours of getting an acceptance from a finalist. I'll notify any other finalists in the process that we've made a decision. Unfortunately, I don't have a position for them at this time, but I'll be keeping their information close by in case another position opens up in the organization that I think they're great for. So that would be kind of the recommended timeline.
Yeah, such good ones.
I would say try to balance due process of them getting through their interviews and getting through the evaluation of you plus others with your interest in and your desire for the role. So maybe a weekly email if you're in the process with new partners, maybe the phone screen person the first week. The second week you send an email to the hiring manager and you copy the recruiter on it. Great. The third email after you meet with a panel, you reach out to those panelists, you copy the hiring manager and the recruiter on that. That would be, I think, a good and fair rhythm. Any more than that, and it kind of sets up some red flags for us recruiters if we get a message every day from you asking about the timeline of the position.
Right, absolutely. And vice versa. I mean, like I said earlier, it's going to be the same way that we're interviewing you, you're interviewing us. And so you want that communication to come, both, at a balance both ways. And so I love that, as you were speaking and everyone, all of our panelists today, it really sounded like that you should build build that relationship with your recruiter. So many of us, you mentioned being a full cycle recruiter, we also have our agency recruitings as well, like with Advent Talent. And so there's usually a little bit of a gap sometimes, where the recruiter has to now reach out to the hiring manager, hiring manager has to get back. And even in-house recruiting, corporate recruiting, like my team does, we do ourselves. I mean, there are still times that we are really trying to get the answer for you. So we're trying to make sure we're leaving that line of communication because there's so many things that happen in the background that, we're really trying to work out for the best of yourself and for the company. And so as we're close to time, I want to make sure that we leave some time for our Q&A. But Jay, I have one last question. So often the recruiters are reluctant to share specific feedback about the candidate's interview performance. So when they're not selected, I know this is a big one, to move forward. What advice would you share with the job seekers here today that are trying to secure those interviews, but they're just not being selected in the process? Like Cameron said, maybe not chosen one. Maybe they, will be in the next group, but still, those rejections hurt. So any tips on that?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, I do work as a recruiter, but it doesn't mean I haven't been a job seeker myself. So first of all, don't give up. Different roles have different requirements, and some of these requirements means more roles are going to be more competitive than others. And I've recruited for some example positions might be I have a very hard time finding a candidate for this one because it's such a niche role that nobody has it, versus like if I'm just sourcing for somebody with accounting finance background, that means there's a whole lot of people for me to choose from.
Mhm.
And again, going back to my earlier remark, you have to make yourself stand out from those other thousands of applicants that have the same exact qualifications that you do. And some advice that's a little bit more relevant to the state, but I think it can be used for other organizations as well. When you're reading through that job posting, and all job postings are different too, but usually there's like a minimum qualifications or preferred qualifications. First off, make sure you meet those minimum qualifications. If a position is asking for 2 years of supervisory experience, typically you need to have that experience for that role to get passed on to the next round. And every organization has a different approach when it comes to vetting as well. But make sure you meet those minimum qualifications first of all. And there might be some preferred qualifications on there. An example of that could be experience working in a collaborative team environment.
Mhm.
And if you can meet the minimum qualifications, awesome. If you can meet all the preferred qualifications, even better. And then the next step is making sure that you spell that out correctly in your resume. Make it easy for whoever is vetting that resume to see that you do have that specific qualification mentioned. And then Cameron mentioned really good as well about building relationships, and I would second that as well. Typically if recruiters have a really good handful of candidates, say we've got 5 really good candidates, but we can only hire one, we still want to reach out to those 4 because, we want to make sure that we find a job for them as well, because
Absolutely.
it makes our job easier to know that we've got a really good set of qualified candidates that we can always reach out to. So it doesn't mean this is our only way to engage or our only time. I might not have a job for you today, but hey, 2 months from now, 3 months from now, the right role might open up and the recruiter might reach out back to you again. So build relationships, don't be disappointed, and most importantly, don't burn any bridges with anybody at all, because you might need them later in the future. So
Absolutely. And the one great thing about, as we share with job seekers to network, we also as recruiters network. And so there might not be an opportunity that we didn't have, but Jay, you may have it, or Cameron, you may have that opportunity, or Candy. I love to share information. So sometimes it's, hey, do you mind if I connect you with, another one of my colleagues that actually has a similar position. So we're always passing, resumes around with the permission as well. So don't, like you said, don't burn bridges, because we do love to talk and share things with each other. So, all right, we're at 12:50. I want to make sure that I get to those questions. So I usually would do a rapid fire question. So let's just go. 30 seconds or less, best advice for candidates to be successful, interview or at the offer stage. 30 seconds or less. Candy, go right ahead.
Okay, 30 seconds. I would say again, when you're interviewing, bring your authentic self. Make sure that it's a good fit, for you from the culture standpoint too, that you click with everybody, this is the manager you want to work for. Let them see your personality a little bit in the interview as well. So that's what you're going to be bringing every day. For the offer stage, I would say, having open and honest discussions. If at the beginning of the process you're talking about a certain salary, you get to the offer stage, don't bump it by $30,000 because now you think they really like you. And I mean, usually companies have budgets they have to work with. So when you've already kind of established that number, typically they probably can't go higher. So I understand wanting to try to get more, but there also has to have that open conversation early on.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And Jay, 30 seconds or less, what would be your advice? So
keep growing your skills, keep growing your soft skills. I know as a recruiter, I've been through many interviews, but if I'm interviewing for a job, sometimes I still get those butterflies in my stomach too, right? So keep growing and keep practicing. You know, if you've got really good technical skills already, maybe you just need to really learn how to work on communication skills, soft skills. You can join things like, Toastmasters, go to different networking events, keep looking at career force centers, go for like resume reviews, mock interviews. Those things will help you to continue grow in your interviewing skills. No matter how good you are at something, you can always know more. So
Absolutely. So, so true. No matter how many times we interview, it's always good to keep our skills up as well. So Cameron, 30 seconds less. What would you give to us for that?
Yeah, I would say be confident. And however that shows up for you doesn't mean being extroverted and unrelenting necessarily in confidence, but be confident. Quick little anecdote. I posted a job a couple of weeks ago where I have 2 open positions to give from it, and I had over 300 applicants. So by the time you're getting to that, even that first interview, you're likely already surpassing 270 other applicants, right, for one of these positions. So be confident. We've looked at your resume. We think your skills are great. Show us, continue to show us how great you are. Be confident, be kind, be clear, and be careful as you are a job seeker in selecting the opportunity that's going to work well for you. Don't just take a job because you need a job. Take a job that you think is going to help you get to the next step of your career.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Now I'm going to the Q&A. I have so many questions, and if we don't get a chance to get them answered here live, we will be sure to get those answers to you. What is hands down the best question you've been asked by a candidate? Jay, you want to take this one on in a few seconds?
the best question I would say towards an interview, I recall we had a really good competitive pool again. The candidate asked me, "Hey, based on what you've learned of me so far, is there anything that would not that would limit you from offering me the job right now?" And of course, we got the usual background checks we got to go through and things like that. But that spelled to me like that person was really confident that they had the ability to do the job. And it kind of threw us a ringer, like a question to us too, right? That's something that we had to think about. So
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I have a hand up. Susan, will we be able to unmute the person? Ken, I believe, wanted to ask a question live, or did we want to hold that one?
I think it's in the
To
Q&A.
figure out how to unmute myself.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think there is a way for us to unmute.
Okay. Okay,
attendees
sounds
at
good.
this point. Sorry.
That's okay, Ken. I saw your hand up, and so we'll get that answered for you. I'm going to keep rolling down. I say, what are your thoughts on a strong finish during an interview? And that's coming from Daryl. And I would say, Ken, do you want to take that one on quickly?
Yeah, I would say just at the end of the interview, expressing your interest, asking the question on when they should have an answer, asking if there's any concerns about their background, or anything that you would want us to expand upon more before you finish the conversation.
Yeah.
Just doing that good follow-up, expressing it, ask if there's any concerns or things we could address right away.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I love this one because this one gets next question is a little mixed emotions about it sometimes. How important are references, and what do you look for in references nowadays, 2024? What do we look for, Cameron?
References these days are tricky. I try to keep things pretty wide. So what I try to do on the recruiter side of things is when somebody provides references, I will typically either through phone or email try to educate the reference a little bit on what the nature of the job is, and then ask some very general questions like, do you think this is a good position for this person? Do you see anything getting in the way of this person being successful in a role like this? And then I typically ask at the end, is there anything that you want to add that you think is important for me to know about this individual? And that way, I can apply that to a number of different positions and circumstances. Jay probably has different requirements because of having a lot of compliance and financial involvement. But for an organization like mine, where a lot of our roles are more relational and less technical, I try to give generalized questions that will give me a more complete impression of a person and opens the floor to some storytelling that encourages honesty rather than judgment.
Wonderful. Although it's such great feedback on that one and advice. These questions are just so amazing. I have one that's, what about filtering out narcissist type of managers who are great at curating the first impression? And I actually just taught a workshop on the different interviewee styles and interviewer styles. So this is a really great question. So Jay, really quick, and then also Candy, you can jump in on that one too. What are some different types? They kind of seem a certain way, but you're like, that's not good.
Do you want to go first, Candy? And what
Okay.
was the question again, Erica?
What about filtering out narcissists? So different personalities, type of managers who are great at curating the first impression. So it really does not even have to be that word. It can be like, what should you filter out when you have managers who are really great, just like candidates, at really bringing a first great impression? Like how you put your spidey systems up to say, is this a good fit or not?
Yeah, I would say for me, realizing that every workplace is different, right? And people have different work styles and different personalities that they bring in. If that is something, if I was a job seeker and had some maybe past trauma working with a manager that wasn't the best or didn't provide me the support that I needed, perhaps look for some ways to gain out of the interview by asking some questions towards the end of the interview about that management style, or learn a little bit more about the organization. And again, with some of those questions, I think you can get to, if you ask about retention rate and turnover, things like
Yes.
that. But I always go with being kind. If you're kind, everyone's going to help you. And I know that's kind of a cheesy answer, but everyone is going to be willing to be on your side if you're not the narcissist person. So
I mean, it's really about mimicking behavior as well. It's almost like mirroring each other. So if you are high energy, it's like we're going to be high energy. If you're just kind of, a little bit mellow, but maybe not for me though. I think it would be hard. I'm just high energy. All right. Thank you. All right. Mary, I see that
people
you
that have
popped
to go to
on.
their
Yep,
1
go ahead.
o'clock because it's a virtual world, but we
Yeah, go
just
ahead.
want to thank you guys. Thank you so much for joining. It was delightful to be here. Thank you, Erica. Thank you, Candy. And of course, Cameron and Jay. We appreciate you being with us. And just keep in mind, be persistent. Don't give up. Keep growing. Keep practicing. All great, great ideas and suggestions from our people, and it is a process, right? And you're dealing with humans, so that whole relationship focus is so important. And thanks so much again for spending your lunch with us.
Thank you. Hope you
guys.
enjoyed.